Good evening. About 4 weeks ago, we interviewed some people in Clondrohid Community Hall, and these people were involved in the provision of a community field for the parish of Clondrohid. During those interviews, Mr. Michael Creed, one of the treasurers, mentioned that almost £10,000 had been spent to date on the development of the field. The weather has been very good since, and a lot of progress has been made. All the stones and boulders have been removed from the field. It has been completely levelled, and most of the entrance wall has been completed. Naturally enough, that costs money, and the committee involved are now in the process of raising funds to pay for some of the work which has been completed. More work still remains to be done. At the present time, almost £5,000 has been spent this year in the work which has been done. And starting next week, a 12-week draw will take place to try and raise some funds to pay for the work which has been done and the remaining work. The court treasurer with Mr. Michael Creed, and the man mainly responsible for this draw is Mr. Paddy Cockery. Paddy's with me now, and I would like to hear from Paddy how this draw will be run.
Well, first of all, the first draw will take place the 12th of June. This is our third year running this draw. It consists of a 12-week draw. We distribute the cards to various people. We've actually 37 people with cards this year. We run the draw for 12 weeks. The prize money each week is £150. The first prize is £100, and we also have 5 prizes of £10 each. This year as well, we have an extra incentive to get in the money as early as we can. It costs £1 a week to enter the draw, 12 weeks, and if a person joins for the 12 weeks together and pays it in one instalment, we give it for £10. Now, anyone that pays the £10 is also eligible for a special draw which will be held on the 12th of June, and the bonus prize there is a portable television, and we hope that this will be an incentive for all the people to subscribe as good as they can.
So the first draw, Paddy, is taking place on the 12th of June. When will the subsequent draws take place?
Well, we'll be running weekly draws. We would hope to run them on possibly a Monday night. Definitely Monday or Tuesday night, and there'll be a draw held each week.
So we would have the results available for the following Wednesday nights. Who are the people who will be selling these cards? In the northern side of the parish you have?
Well, the chief man in the northern side of the parish is Eddie McDonough. He will also be helped out by a few more fellas. The list actually is very varied. Willie Neville, John Mahoney, Dan Creedon will be helping out on the Mullifluke side. And on the Carrignimmer side he'll be helped out by a few more fellas. I think I haven't their names to hand at the moment. Chris Shearing is one that comes to mind. He's also a great man to gather in money from that side of the parish. So Eddie is the man mainly responsible there for the Carrignimmer side.
This is the cards on which they will be selling the lines, and if you meet one of these individuals and you wish to make £100 or £10, all you got to do is to buy a line, and the cost of a line to enter the draw is £1. Or as Paddy said, and there's an incentive for you to do so, you may buy lines for each of the draws for the 12 weeks, and that will only cost you £10. The price... You may be wondering where we are recording tonight. Well, this programme is being recorded in the Clondrohid Tavern, Michael Keller's premises in Clondrohid.
Right.
And tonight we have interfered with their privacy. Nobody is able to talk about the weather, the price of cattle, what's happening in the locality, how the football team got on last Sunday, what the priest was talking about at Mass last Sunday, or any of these major events. And some of the locals have indeed volunteered to provide you with some entertainment tonight. And the first person on offer is Magilla Cockery.
It's well I know that often folk keep wondering, when my eyes a far off look they see, what can it be the cause of all my dreaming? What is this dream so very dear to me? my home sweet home that I so fondly cherish. The dear ones there mean everything to me. In all this world, if there could be a heaven, I'm sure it's in that cottage by the lea. It's grand to stand outside that cottage doorway and gaze across those cornfields rich and gold, to see the stream go rippling by the meadow, or watch the shepherd calling to his fold. Yes, that's my dream, my lovely dream of homeland. And though my thoughts are over, I can see it's soon I found I left my heart behind me, within that lovely cottage by the lea.
When Dennis Manning was speaking to you, he mentioned some of the people who played on the 1937 Clondrohid football team. Two of those people are deceased, maybe more of them. Arias de Greven Anmica, August Nadina Golier, Edmig Rowing. One of the people who played on that team is with us tonight, and I'm glad to say he's hale and hearty, Michael Keller. Michael, do you remember who was on that team?
I do. The team was reformed, as you've said, in 1937, and for that year, it was made up of the following players: Joe Buckley, Bell McCarkin, John C. Carey, better known as John Clondrohid from Ardeen. There was Jack Healy, Cheery, Gabriel Nussington from Beckerfree, and his brother Tim. You then had Padder Redden from Clondrohid, and John Lucy, R.I.P. as well, from national teacher in Carriginime. You had Peter Redden Blontan, who was officer of pastors, the Turner Award. You had Nick Harkin, Phil Walter, who was after passed away. His brother, Father Tim, and Stephen Connors. In the final of that year, Dan Cavan Blonarag played in goal. He's also has passed away. And we did have the three Murphy brothers from Domree, John and Dan and Ginny. From Macroom, you had Dan Teddy Murphy and his brother Nick. Nick has also passed away since. Also, Mick McNamara and Jerome O'Neill, who both passed away. And one of our outstanding players from Ballinagree, Billy Wiseman, who was also passed away. That was the team that took part in 1937. Well, at the end of that period, they had a bit of a difference with the Cork board, and in 1938 they decided to take part in the Duhal division. They were beaten that year. They were beaten in the final by Ballincollig here in the Cork after a draw. 37. And as I've already said, they had a difference with the Cork board, and they decided to affiliate with the Duhal board for 38. During the 38 period, and from that until 42, the following players came into the selection. You had Paddy McSweeney from Carriginime, Dennis Manning here from the village, you had Father Sean Connell from Ardeen, you had Jackie Toomey Ballinakira, better known as Jackie Mike Matt, Father Creedon also from Ballinakira, you had Tim Sullivan from the Sturgain, and you had Terry Haley, Martin Justin Saul, and Connie Sheehan from Macroom. You had Jerry Alec from Clondrohid in Carriginime, he was better known as Goss. And you had Dinny Betty Carey from Carriginime. You had Dan Driscoll from Mount Cross, and Pat Sweeney from Cooley. In 1942, our great rivals in Duhallow, Knocknagree, Cullen Club, failed to field the team, and 5 of their most prominent players played for Clondrohid that year. There was Dean McCarthy and his brother Jack, Michal Murphy, Jackie O'Connor, who was a brother of cousin of Juddy's, the local man, and Jeremy O'Keefe. In 1938, they reached the final of the Duhallow division, and they were beaten by Drumtariff in the final that year, which was played in Kanturk. The following year, they again reached the final, and they were beaten by Quillen in Mill Street. In 1940, they again reached the final of the Duhallow division, and they defeated Knocknagree in the final that year.
How was that match played?
It was also played in Mill Street. Mostly all our games were played in Mill Street, except another occasion we had to go to Kanturk. In 1941, we again fell victims to Knocknagree in the final. And then in 1942, that was the year that we were assisted by the Knocknagree Quillen players. We defeated Newmarket in the final, which was played in Kanturk. After this game, we lost quite a lot of our best players to Macroom, Mick Corcoran, the 3 Muckley brothers, Stephen Connors and Billy Wiseman. So this golden age in the Clondrohid football, 37-42 period, had come to an end. For about 2 or 3 years or 4, we struggled on in Duhallow, but at the end of that time, it was no longer feasible to keep going as we hadn't the players at the time. And some of our most prominent players left, joined the Mystery Club of 48, 49. And 3 of those won a county medal with Mystery in 1949. Dan Driscoll, Dennis Manning and Jody Connor. There was one remarkable thing about the club over 3 different periods. It was reformed in the 1920s. It was again reformed in 1937 and again reformed in 1963. And it was a Carrigilliam man who was mainly responsible for reforming it on all 3 occasions. There was a teacher in Carrigilliam by the name of O'Shea, I think the Master O'Shea was called him. He reformed it. He formed a young club here in the middle 20s, and they went into the final of the under 14 against Macroom, the Macroom number grade A team of that year. Then in 1937, John Lucy, national teacher Carrigilme, he was the backbone in the reformation of the team at that period. And on the present period, Father Buckley, who was Courtin Carrigilme, was again the leading man on this occasion. So Carrigilme has been very prominent in reforming the club in the parish on all those 3 occasions.
Thanks, Michael. That was a most interesting discourse on some of the history of Clondrohid parish. There is a lot more to it. This year is the centenary of the GAA. The GAA was founded in 1884, but would you believe it, before that time football was being played in the parish of Clondrohid. A football team was entered in competitions when the GAA was founded, and the man who will tell us something about some of those years is Dennis O'Connell.
Even before the GAA was founded, Clondrohid football was popular in Clondrohid even a long time before it. And the first reference to a football team in Clondrohid is in 1877, when they were regarded as the best team in the barony of Musselburgh at that time. And so prominent were they at that stage that a challenge match was issued between the best team in the barony of Duhallow over Cool Clock, which was actually the parish of Drumtariff. A challenge match was arranged and it was played in Mill Street. Now, many of the prominent players at that time and details of the match itself is recorded in a song that was written subsequent after the match taking place. The song is called The Dashing Young Blades of Clondrohid, and it well describes the match itself, and Michaela is now going to sing it.
You sons and fair daughters of Erin's green isle, I pray in den ear to my ditty, those incompetent lines I hope you'll not blame, for in writing a team I'm not witty. 'Tis incompetent this sweet muse of mine, in talent I own to I am not sublime, but still from my choice I would vocally chime the valiant young blades of Clondrohid. Those men they are valiant and brave in the field, as the same from their sires they inherit. In each act or part they're disdaining to yield, each day adding fame to their credit. Their deeds at the football are very well known, the whole praise of Musgrave is entirely their own. To act with true respect you'll always find prone the valiant young blades of Clondrohid. When cool clocks sent a challenge that they would meet, a response was sent off quickly after, that they would assemble near ancient Mill Street, by the banks of the gliding black water. As soon as both parties had entered the town, with sneers proud to holler on Musgrave did frown. But despite their presumption, their pride was pulled down by the valiant young blades from Clondrohid. Some thousands assembled to witness the play, and they came from all parts of the country. Both lads and lasses saw bonny and gay, from the plains of Duhallow and Musgrave. Some came by long car, and some came by rail, from Newcastle West, Fermoy and all down the rail. And the sons of Macroom too, it's true, did not fail to accompany the blades of Clondrohid. When both teams stripped off for to stand the ground, Clondrohid buckled on their belts tight. With spirits so wanton you'd see them jump round, like a roebuck so nimble and light. It's true the grand scene it was pleasing to view, when cool clock boys put on their tight caps white and blue, determined, most anxious to dare and to do, the valiant young blades from Clondrohid. When the ball was thrown out, as is always the rule, Clondrohid men showed them some play. In less than 5 minutes they had the first goal, which did all the big bullies dismay. It was then the chief struggle went on for the day, and the Musgrave men did not shrink in the play. All judges decided awarding the play to the valiant young blades from Clondrohid. There was Dan and McCallaghan, we will inscribe their names in the annals of fame for their valour. Looney and Corcoran deserving the same, Kelleher, young Maney and Connell, the Murphys, the Rardens, the Welshes and Shares have shown manly vigour deserving much praise. Creedon and Tobin selected choice players mongst the valiant young blades from Clondrohid. There was Father O'Donovan and good Father Ling, much trouble they freely did lavish. At the head of the parties they boldly were seen, securing all lights for their parish. May graces attend those young pastors divine, I hope as bright gems in the church they long shine, and stand to her cause against tyranny and crime, as they stood for the Beyblades of Clondrohid. There is young Johnny Creedon, that gent of great fame, with laurels he'll soon be rewarded, for his manly acts are relating the same, and I hope he will never discard them. I wish him good health and pleasant long life, may fortune attend him against daring, danger and strife, and I hope ere long he attains a good wife from amongst the fair maids of Clondrohid. So fill up your glasses and drink a good toast to those valiant young champions that never yet vocally of themselves boast, but manfully showed off their actions. In Erin's green pastures, amongst lords, dukes and peers, their names will be told for hundreds of years. So now, ere I finish, here's a hearty 3 cheers for the valiant young blades of Clondrohid.
That was a long song, and it happened a long time ago. You must remember now that that song was made up about an event that happened 7 years before the founding of the GA, a football match played between the men of Clondrohid, representing Musgrave, and the champions of Duhallow, played in Mill Street. When the GA was founded, the emphasis in the early years, as would be gauged by the title as the Gaelic Athletic Association, was on athletics. And the men and ladies from the parish of Clondrohid were to the forefront in these athletic events. Dennis O'Connell has researched it, and he has come up with some interesting facts about those years.
Yeah, well, one of the most prominent of athletes at that time was Paddy Looney, who was a member of the old Clondrohid football team of 1877. He was also an excellent athlete and particularly prominent in jumping events. Now, in 1888, after the GA, 4 years after the GA was founded, they sent out a team of athletes, the best that Ireland had at that time, to represent Ireland in contests in America. It was known as the Invasion Force of America, and Paddy Looney was one of those athletes. Another man from Macroom as well travelled with that team. His name was McCarthy. He also travelled with that team, and he stayed in America afterwards. Now, Paddy Looney held the world record for the hop, step and jump, covering just short of 50 feet in the hop, step and jump, which was a great distance at that time. He also competed in America with that team, but he never won an Irish championship, particularly because there were so many prominent athletes at that stage who were particularly good at that event. Dan Shanahan from Kilfinane in County Limerick and J.P. O'Sullivan from Killorglin, County Kerry, was also an outstanding at that event. And 49 feet to cover at that time was a particularly good jump. Now, Paddy Looney afterwards became very much associated with Gaelic games, and afterwards refereed matches and became a prominent member in later years as he was living in Macroom of the Macroom GA team, and he died rather young in 1906. He was the most prominent at that time, but there were also very many local athletes who took part in competitions and sports meetings in Macroom and all over the country. And names that come to mind immediately are Paddy Murphy of Gortnalicka, who was particularly good at the half mile, and Johnny Murphy from Borratanachnook, or Johnny Creedon, sorry, and he was a champion miler. And there are two other people that come to mind at that time.
Excuse me, Dennis, was Jerry Crean known as the Miler?
Yes, he was known as Creedon the Miler, actually, and he only died about 4 years ago, at the age of about 98. He immigrated to America fairly young, but at that time he had to work to make a living, and he didn't dedicate himself to athletics, as athletes can do more so now, and but he was still a very good athlete in his time.
Incidentally, that man that you're speaking about was living in a house which was situated almost across the road from where Dan Sullivan is living now in Borratanachnook.
That's right, yeah.
Some of the remnants of that house, you could still make them out. Three of the walls you could make out, not the fourth. And that man was known as the Miler, and he was training the field across the road, and 4 laps of that field was counted as a mile. And since he was seen training, running a mile, he was known as a result of that as the Miler. Let's get on with the other people, Dennis.
Now, in football, Clondrohid particularly excelled in football. But it was not until about 1889 that they first entered the county championship in football. And one of their first games was against Ballinagree, and they beat Ballinagree. They went on to meet Macroom in the next round of the county championship. Macroom at that time had a particularly strong team. They were one of the best clubs in the county, and Clondrohid lost to Macroom in that match by just a single point, which was a very credible display at the time. The captain of the Clondrohid team that year was Con O'Shea of Carriganima. They also had a second team, which was captained by Paddy Healy. Although eliminated fairly early in the county championship that year by Macroom, who went on to the semi-final or final of the county, where they were beaten by Middleton, who subsequently won the All-Ireland for Cork, which was Cork's first All-Ireland in football. Clondrohid competed in 2 tournaments that year in 1889, which they made a name for themselves and became fairly famous all over Cork. The first of those tournaments was the Clondrohid tournament, which was probably the biggest tournament played in 1889 in County Cork, and Clondrohid won that tournament. They also reached the final of the Macroom tournament, and there may have been particularly bad feeling between Macroom and Clondrohid at the time, and Clondrohid having reached that final, only 10 minutes of the game was played itself when the Clondrohid captain took his men off the field because one of the Clondrohid players had been struck by a Macroom player, and no action had been taken by the referee. When asked afterwards when the referee was asked afterwards why he hadn't taken any action, he said he could not take any action as the ball was out of play at the time in the game, and he felt that he could not have the power to take any action against the Macroom player for striking Clondrohid player. Macroom were awarded a match, but the biggest tournament that year, as I say, was the Clondrohid tournament, and Clondrohid won that, and were regarded at that time as one of the best teams in the county. The following year, in 1890, they competed again in the county championship. Their first match was against Ballyvourney at Carrigafuka, and Ballyvourney never turned up at that match, and so Clondrohid were awarded a walkover, but they were eliminated rather early in the next match. They were beaten by Kilmurray, so that put Clondrohid out of the county championship in 1890. But in 1891 they came back strongly, and it was probably one of the most glorious years in the GAA in Clondrohid because they won all matches against all comers that year. They competed in the county championship. In the first match they played was against Kilmurray at Macroom, and they beat Kilmurray by 4 points to 2. In the county semi-final they defeated Dunmanwah in Cork Park on a fairly big score, and in the final they met the Nil Desperandum club of Cork City. Nils at that time were regarded as one of the best clubs in the county, and the match was played itself. The county final was played in Clondrohid, and Clondrohid won that match on a very large score. And before the match, the Nils team objected to the size of the field, and the field was measured. Nils felt that the field wasn't big enough to hold the match, but the field was measured and it was shown that the field was longer than the minimum width required or the minimum length required for a football pitch, and was wider than the maximum width required for a football pitch. But even at this stage, the Nils were still refusing to play the game, so Clondrohid supporters and footballers widened and lengthened the field itself to satisfy the Nils team, and they still won the match fairly convincingly. They went on from that then to contest the Munster Championship, and they met Kerry. The Kerry representatives that year were Ballymackelligat, and they beat Ballymackelligat in Killarney, and they went on from that then to contest the Munster final against Dungarvan, and that was played in Youghal. And they beat Youghal again on a very large score. And they went from that then on to contest the All-Ireland final, which was not played until about February 1892. Now their opponents in the All-Ireland final were the Young Ireland Club of Dublin, who were a very strong team at that time. They actually won the All-Ireland 3 times in a row for Dublin. And the match was played in February 1892, and in it Clondrohid were fairly unlucky in that they conceded 2 goals early on in the match, and at that time any number of points wouldn't equal a goal. A goal was what counted. Points only mattered if both teams had scored an equal amount of goals. Clondrohid Dublin scored 2 goals early on, and even after that Clondrohid dominated the game completely. And even in the second half, the ball never hardly left the Dublin side of the field. Clondrohid scored the goal fairly early on in the second half after an immense amount of pressure, and they followed it up with several points, and then towards the end of the game they scored a second goal. The final score at the end of the match was 2 goals and 9 points for Clondrohid, as against 2 goals and 1 point for Dublin. But the referee, on leaving the pitch, said that he had second thoughts about the first Clondrohid goal which was scored. He felt that it shouldn't be allowed, and although approached by the Cork County Board representatives at the match to see why it shouldn't be allowed, he said he'd have to think about it. At 7:20 that evening, after the match, he said he had made a decision that the first Clondrohid goal that had been scored was not a goal, and that he was awarding the match to Dublin. Clondrohid immediately objected to that decision. It was before the Central Council of the GAA, who deemed that the match would have to be replayed, and the match was to be replayed afterwards. But concerning that goal, the goal umpire for Clondrohid that year was a man by the name of O'Connell, and he describes the goal for Clondrohid, which I have here before me. About 1.5 yards from the Dublin goalpost, a Clondrohid man got the ball, and he was immediately jumped upon by 3 of the Young Irelands and held down and pinned down. The Clondrohid men then came up with a rush and shoved the man, ball and all, through the goalpost. When Clondrohid made the goal, there was a ringing cheer went up from the thousands of people that were at the match. And he also states that the goal was given and all, and the ball was kicked out in a normal way as if his goal was scored. The Central Council said it would have to be replayed, which was a very serious decision for Clondrohid, because they already were after exhausting all their funds and were short of finance. Now, Clondrohid offered Dublin to come down to Cork and they'd play them in Cork, but Dublin wouldn't come down. Eventually the match was decided. It was decided in 1893, about a year afterwards, that the match should be played at a halfway point between the two teams, which would be Thurles. And that was in 1893, and neither Dublin nor Clondrohid put in an appearance on that day, with the result that consequently Dublin are generally credited with winning the All-Ireland for that year, 1891 All-Ireland. Immediately after that match, Clondrohid got down to business again and competed in the county championship for 1892. And this was another fine year for Clondrohid, because they beat all before them again, teams such as William O'Brien's of Cork City, Castlemartyr, Kilmurray, Drumtariff, and it was Kilmurray who they actually beat in the Cork County final that year. They went on then, in the end of that year, to contest in the Munster Championship again, and they were beaten that year by Lana Rangers of Killarglen in the final in Killarney. Clondrohid happened to be missing several of their players the same day, namely a fellow by the name of Lucy was their goalkeeper, and he was from Cove. At the same year they could pick from the county team, they could pick from the other players from the county, and they were missing another man by the name of Griffin, one of their forwards. And Clondrohid were beaten that year, and they were eliminated from the championship that year, the 1892 championship. In 1893, Clondrohid again contested the county championship and were regarded by all as the strongest team in the county. In their first match, they played against Macroom. The match was played in Rockborough, to the west of Macroom, and Clondrohid scored 8 points, and Macroom failed to score during the entire match. In the second round, they were to meet Drumtariff, but could not field the team. Apparently, the players had given up, or the team had disbanded for some reason, and on that count, Drumtariff were given a walkover, and that was the end of that great period in Clondrohid's football history.
Thanks very much, Dennis. Now, a few things that many people like to know about. The members of that famous Clondrohid team is generally referred to as the 1890 team. Who were the people that were on that team, and who were their present descendants within the parish?
Now, there were 3 Larrys from the townland of Lecanine. The captain of the team was an outstanding footballer. His name was Con O'Leary, and he had 2 brothers, Dennis O'Leary, who was the goalkeeper for the team, and Jack O'Leary. Now, a grandson of Con O'Leary is the present proprietor of the Victoria Hotel Macroom, Harry O'Leary. There were also 3 brothers from Winnifluke named Kelleher, Dan Kelleher, Jack Kelleher and Mick Kelleher from Winnifluke, who were on that team, whose relations are still living around the Winnifluke Mullinahorny area. There were 3 brothers again from Carriganimmis side, from Glontown. Their names were, there were Duggans. There was Dan Duggan, Con Duggan and Jack Duggan.
Sorry, Dennis. So, would Dan and Din Duggan and Glontown be related to them?
They are, I think, yeah. They are his sons.
And
There were Desmonds then, Coolacassan. There was 2 Desmond brothers playing, Andy Desmond and Pat Desmond. Also from Mullinahorna there was a man named Michael Quill playing, who has no relation around, I think, at the moment, but who was living up there at that time. There was also Tim O'Shea, who was a national teacher in Carriganimmis, and who also played a prominent part in the administration of the games at those times, as he was Assistant Secretary of the Cork County Board. Another man that should be mentioned in connection with the team is a man by the name of Tim Creedon, who was in charge of the team at that time, and who was also Mid-Cork representative at County Board meetings in those years, and he looked after the team as well. Other members of the team were Dennis O'Sullivan, who would be an uncle of Connie Sullivan, Carriganimmis. There was a Tim O'Riordan of Goran playing as well. Jork Kaler, who would be an uncle of Jork Canuck Moncross. There was a Johnny Murphy Scranard. Dennis Corcoran Kilvolfa was the father of Mick Corcoran, who was one of the best players for Clondrohid in the period 1937-1942, which you've heard about, and who also played for Cork. Jeremiah Hearn, who may have been from around the Winnifluke district as well. There was Crahor Kaler from Ardeen, whose son also was another prominent member of the 37-42 team. There was Reddy Welsh. Carriganimmis was also a member of that team. I think they're mainly the members of the team, but of course there was also many others who played off and on with that team as well. But these were the main ones.
Dennis, have you any idea as to where their training pitch or their own football pitch was at that time?
Since many of the members of the team were from Carriganimmis that side at that time, I feel that the training grounds were on the northern side of the parish, and there was a field of Tim Creedon that time had John Horgan's farm Gurtavanner at that stage, and there was a football field there anyway where they used to train, and I'd say that might have been the training ground. But that team then although it did not compete in the 1894 championship or 1895, they did come back to contest the 1896 championship, where they were eliminated by the Nils of Cork, and they were still considered a fairly good team at that time. The captain of the team in 1896 was Pat Desmond of Coolixstan, and other prominent members included Dennis Corcoran and the Nils and Fermoy, and those teams were the biggest teams in Cork at that stage, and Clondrohid was still able to hold their own fairly well at that stage. They also competed in the Clondrohid tournament, which was one of the biggest tournaments held in County Cork in that year. The final was played in 1897, and Clondrohid reached the final, and they were beaten by Canavy in the final of that. And that happened to be the last year of that team, because they broke up immediately after that and did not contest any matches in the years after.
So basically, after 1897, a football team as such ceased to exist in the parish of Clondrohid. Would that be correct, Dennis?
After 1897, after that then, Con Welsh, who happened to be one of the greatest weight throwers in those early years, seemed to have built a team around himself. He was one of the most prominent members of the team anyway, and it seemed around 1902, 1903, they again had a very good team, and they played in Mill Street in 2 matches. Now, Mill Street in 1903 reckoned themselves to be one of the best teams at that time. They played very well in a tournament at Kanturk, which was competed for by several clubs in Cork and Kerry, and they beat Killarney in that tournament. Clondrohid challenged them to a match which was played in Mill Street, and Clondrohid beat them. A second part of that challenge was played in Carriganima, and Clondrohid were beaten very narrowly in that match. But that team of 1903 again immediately disbanded. And one of the great reasons for this is that many of the players, the most prominent players, were immigrating to America and England in those years, and the team disbanded. Some of the team played afterwards with Macroom, particularly when Macroom had their best team, probably one of their best teams ever, as they won county championships in 1909 to 1912. And that period, Macroom were the best team in the county. 4 of the Clondrohid players were on that Macroom team. There was Jack Driscoll, Dick Connell from Kilvoltra, and there was Jack Kaler from Nissacrasig. There was also a Dan Cochray, who was born in Mullinroe, who was captain of the Macroom team when they reached, for the first time ever in the 1900s, they reached the county final in 1907, the county semi-final in 1907, and Dan Cochray was the captain of that team. The other members of the team, which included the Clondrohid players, there was Jack Driscoll, who played for Cork in the 1907 All-Ireland final, and in fact in 1911 he won an All-Ireland medal with Cork, playing with a Leeds selected Cork side, and was one of their better players, and that was 1911. At that stage, Clondrohid club did not exist, but many of the leading Clondrohid players had switched their allegiance to Macroom.
Thanks very much, Dennis. We'll now move on to the 1920 team, and I'll ask Michael Keller to give a brief summary of what happened within those years, who reformed it.
Jack Driscoll, of course, who played Macroom, was the father of Dan, who played with Clondrohid in the 37-42 period. And around that time too, another team was formed around 1917 or 18, and there was the Shares of Clondrohid, they were known as the Cash, they were playing in it. And I say some of the Welshers of Carriganima were on that team, and you had the Murphys from Mullinroe, and you had Colnans from Carrigafoka, and Mark Keller, who was 500 Kramer here one time, was also member of that team. And that team reached the county final, and they were beaten by Cork in the county final of 1918. Of course, you had the 10 wars in coming on, and this put a stop to most of the things in the country, and the Civil War started afterwards. But There was a teacher in Calgary by the name of O'Shea, and he formed a young team in the mid-20s. They competed against Macroom in the final of the under-14 of that year. And those young lads were the backbone of the team again in the early 30s and in 37. Lads like John Clondrohid, Kelleher, Joe Buckley, Carney, and some others. Dean Duggan was, and Peter Tavern, of course, also played around that period. There was one thing about the 37 team which I forgot to mention a while ago. That was that there was 3 of that team played with Cork. Mick Corcoran, Billy Wiseman and Danny Murphy. They played in the Cork junior football team in 1940 that won the Munster Championship. And were defeated in the Ireland semi-final by Westmeath, which was played in Thurles prior to the Munster hurling final of that year between Cork and Limerick. In 1942, Mick Corcoran was chosen on the Cork senior football team. And as late as a fortnight ago, it appeared in the Star that he was one of the best players on the Cork team of that day. They were beaten by Kerry and Talley, and the score was 378 points. So this is much as I can recall about that period.
Where did the 1930 team train, Michael?
They trained mostly in Briansfield, what's called Briansfield at Mount Cross. This is where the Macroom Mills is now. And there were Jack Driscoll took great interest in that team. I'd say he was probably chairman of the club. And you had a Danny McCarthy who lived around that area. He was a former Macroom player and was living in Mount Cross at that time. He was also involved in the club. And Dan Quill, who was here from the village. These were the prominent players of that team. They reached the Mick-Cork final of 1927 and they beat by Ballywona that year.
Thanks, Michael. The team, or the club, was reformed a number of times throughout the century. It was reformed in the 20s, it lapsed. It was reformed in the 30s, it lapsed. And it was reformed in 1963, as Michael has stated already, by Father Buckley. And at that time it was under 14 underage teams that were started. And even though the junior team, which developed as a result of it, the junior B team, lapsed and didn't enter competitions for a few years, there has always been an underage team in the parish since then. At the present moment, there is a junior A team. And 2 Sundays ago, they got past the first hurdle of the Mid-Cork Championship when they defeated Ballinora in the first round by 9 points to 7. Last Friday night week, they reached the final of the Musgrave Cup when they defeated Canterbury in Macroom on a score of 9 points to 8. And they now meet the Macroom team in the final of the Musgrave Cup to decide which is the best team in Musgrave. So you can see that even the histories repeat itself at the present day, and many people in the locality are looking forward to this game when the footballers of Clondrohid and the footballers of Macroom meet to decide which is the best team in Musgrave. Now I'll hand you over to John Manny to tell you all about the Bunny Boy.
The trees are growing high, my love, the grass is growing green, and many's the cold and winter's night that I alone have been. It is a cruel and bitter night that I must lie alone, for the bunny boy is young, but he's growing. Oh, Father, dear Father, I think you did me wrong to go and get me married to one that is so young. He is but 60 in years, and I am 21, for the bonny boy is young, but he's growing. Oh, daughter, dear daughter, I did not do you wrong to go and get you married to one that is so young. He will be a match for you when I am dead and gone, for the bonny boy is young, but he's growing. At the early age of 16, he was a married man, and at the age of 17, the father of my son. And at the age of 18 years, o'er his grave the grass grew green. Cruel death put an end to his growing. I'll buy my love a shroud of an ornamental brown, and whilst I am weaving it, the tears they will run down. For once I had a true love, but now he's lying low, and I'll nurse his bonny boy, who's still growing.
We spoke earlier there of the founding the GA and how in the earlier years and at the present day it is still known as the Gaelic Athletic Association. And in the earlier years it was athletics which were the most important event in the activities of the GA. And one family who took an immense part in the Gaelic Athletic Association in the earlier years was the Welsh family of Carriganima, and they excelled particularly in the weight throwing events. Dennis will tell us some of their achievements now.
Con Welsh of Carriganima was probably one of the greatest weight throwers at the beginning of the century. He was born, I think, around 1881 and was a member of the Clondrohid football team, probably of the team, as we said, around 1903. He took up weight throwing at an early age and won at several sports meetings around County Cork. In 1905 he competed in the Irish Championships and won the football place kick competition for distance, which was his first Irish Championship. The following year, in 1906, at the Irish Athletic Championships, his performance was regarded as the most outstanding performance at that meeting. It was at the Cork Athletic Grounds, and he won 6 Irish titles in one day, in the hammer throwing and in the 56 pounds weight, for over the bar and for distance and for other weight throwing events. In the weight throwing events he won 5 titles. He then competed in the football place kick competition and kicked the ball, I think, 222 feet 4 inches, which still stands as an Irish record for the football place kick. In 1907, the year after that, he did not defend his Irish titles as he immigrated to Canada, and in 1907 and 1908 he was the Canadian champion in several different weight throwing events. In 1908, at the Canadian Olympic Trials, he threw the 56 pounds weight, the half hundred, over the bar at 15 feet 9 inches, which broke the world record. After that, he came to Europe and he competed for Ireland in the international match between Scotland and Ireland in Glasgow, where he won the hammer event for Ireland, beating the best hammer thrower at that time, a man by the name of Nicholson, who represented Scotland and who was the best hammer thrower for Britain at that time in the hammer throwing. Immediately after that, he competed at the 1908 Olympic Games in London, where he contested the hammer competition, the 56 pounds weight, although the most popular event in Ireland at that time was not a popular event in general in Europe. So he contested the hammer event, and at that time there was some outstanding hammer throwers around, in particular a man by the name of John Flanagan, who was the hammer champion at the 1900 Olympics and at the 1904 Olympics, and he came back in 1908 to contest the 1908 Olympics.
Sorry, Dennis. Was John Flanagan competing for America?
John Flanagan was competing for America. He was the American champion. Also competing for America was a man by the name of Matt McGrath. And in the event itself, Con Welsh came third in that event.
Am I right in saying, Dennis, that these men who were competing for America were Irishmen who were known as the Irish Welsh?
Yeah. All these men were Irishmen, in fact. Flanagan immigrated fairly early on in his days to America. He was from Kilmallock. And Nina and McGrath, who came second, was also from either, I think, South Tipperary, somewhere there around. And in that event, it was peculiar in a way. The first three, first, second and third, Walsh was third, they all came within a radius of probably within 40 miles of each other. And it was a unique event in the history of the Olympic Games to have the first three hammer throwers, first, second and third, to come within, they were all born within 30 miles of each other in Ireland. After the 1908 Olympics, Con Welsh competed at Cove Sports, and he threw the 56 pounds weight 16 feet 2 over the bar, which was a record that stood for many years. It was a world record, which stood for many years. He went back to America again, where he was American and Canadian champion for some years, and in 1911 he threw the hammer something like 179 feet, which was the best recorded distance for throwing a hammer at that stage in 1911. In 1912 he was Canadian champion. In 1912 there was an unusual event in that the Canadian champion in 1912 for throwing the hammer, Con Welsh. In 1912 the Irish champion for throwing the hammer was a man by the name of Michael Welsh, and there were two brothers. Michael Welsh was about 7 or 8 years younger than Con Welsh. He was his brother, and he started competing at in Irish local sports meetings. He won the Irish Championship in 1912 and 1913, but unfortunately injured himself soon after that, and what was the most promising athlete and the most promising hammer thrower, his career ended there just then. So that Con Welsh did not compete in the Olympic Games in 1912, when many people considered that he would have been the best thrower at the time. And the championship was won by Matt McGrath. And Matt McGrath reckoned at that stage that Con Welsh was one of the best weight throwers in the world, but he never gave any time, or he never dedicated much time to training. But still in all, Con Welsh is still regarded as one of the great weight throwers at the beginning of the century. And Michael Welsh is down the record books as having won 2 All-Ireland titles in the hammer throwing. So there were 2 outstanding weight throwers at the beginning of the century.
Michael Welsh was one of those who in later years ran a dance hall in Carriganima, and we hope at some future stage to interview some of the people who were there at the time, tell you what went on there or did not go on there, and in